My newest book, Advocacy Explained, will be available on Amazon by the end of this year. This episode is the podcast behind the book. It's also a blatant form of self-promotion and hopefully an informative and interesting listen that lets you know how to get a copy.
Podcast starts now.
Advocacy, the process that centers on the art of influence, is the focus of my newest book, simply called Advocacy Explained. The source of inspiration was really people's misconceptions about the practices of advocacy, government relations, public policy, and lobbying. I found that, on the one hand, some professional lobbyists were largely unaware of the purposes of advocacy, particularly grassroots and nonprofit in the legislative process, and on the other hand, senior executives who were well honed in their respective areas of expertise but who were largely unfamiliar with the operations of politics and government assumed that their organization's issues would be solved simply by lobbying the politicians. My experiences teaching and providing field instruction to university students were equally revealing. While students were highly enthusiastic about making change or protesting or advancing an issue, they were not generally knowledgeable about the practices of advocacy vis-a-vis public policy, content promotion, and even the role of the elected representative, despite coming from rigorous programs of study that ranged from business, journalism, political science and governance, and even social work. Sorting out the confusion formed a key reason this book came about. This book is also part of a series of books, Explained. The first, Content Creation and Promotion, and the second, simply called Podcasting. Content creation and promotion was written to explain that content today extends beyond traditional product and service marketing, and applies just as importantly to advocacy, social causes, and election campaigns. That book explains some of the key concepts in identifying and reaching a desired audience. In a sense, it's about the message. Podcasting examines, podcasting. Something I consider to be the most exciting explosion of technology and media in generations. Podcasts are fascinating vehicles to distribute a message, recruit members and volunteers, mobilize a community, and advance causes and issues through the landscape of governance. So that book, you could say, is about the medium and the technique. Advocacy is also amplifying a message, getting that message out there to its intended audiences. Advocacy continues the dialogue by focusing on what you could say is the application. So in this book, I talk about the notion that advocacy is the larger concept, and that lobbying is merely a subset. Corporate lobbying is in fact a subset within lobbying itself. There are few corporations today that don't employ or retain a lobbyist in some capacity. Legislative attempts to address lobbying really tend to focus on corporate lobbying. To draw an analogy, advocacy is the retail department store, and lobbying represents a department within that store, a department that includes specialty products like corporate lobbying. Who are the readers who will most benefit from this book? Advocacy Explained is a reference book that should prove highly useful for anyone new to the practices of government relations, advocacy, or lobbying. Students and new professionals, representatives of organizations concerned about legislative compliance, those who teach in areas on topics such as public policy, advocacy, group politics, or social movements, and anyone who interacts regularly or anticipates such interaction with government office holders. Experienced professionals will also find the overall critique and conceptual reflections of advocacy and lobbying a valuable addition to their baskets of knowledge. So Advocacy Explained now sits in the Coming Very Soon category, published by Henley Point and available globally through Amazon. Visit stephenchristiansen.ca for more episodes of Before, Behind, and Between. This podcast is available on all streaming apps and podcast platforms, including Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and TuneIn. I'm Stephen Christiansen. Thanks for listening.
production of Stephen Christensen. Podcast complete.